Hillman sets a screen, rolls to the basket.
Welcome back to Clark USA fans. Here's Clark from way beyond the logo, and you already know what that means. When she rises up from that kind of distance, it's not just a shot, it's a statement. And right now, in the world of basketball, something bigger than a box score is happening. Something that feels less like a rookie season and more like the beginning of a revolution. Because what we are witnessing is not normal. It's not typical hype. It's not a media-created moment that fades in a few weeks. This is different. This is historic. This is the kind of shift that forces legends, the untouchables, the icons, the men who have seen dynasties rise and fall, to stop, watch, and speak. And when the greatest of all time start paying attention, you know the ground is moving. A 22-year-old rookie has stepped into professional basketball and somehow turned the entire conversation upside down. Not quietly, not politely, but loudly, boldly, unapologetically. Caitlin Clark isn't just scoring. She isn't just breaking records. She isn't just filling arenas. She's disrupting power structures. She's challenging comfort zones. She's exposing insecurities. And she's doing it all with a basketball in her hands and a logo range jumper that feels like a thunderclap every time it drops. The question isn't whether she's talented. That debate ended months ago. The real question is this: how can one rookie shake an entire league so deeply that former MVPs, Hall of Famers, and global icons feel compelled to weigh in? Because this isn't just about basketball. This is about control. This is about visibility. This is about money. This is about influence. And most of all, this is about who gets to be the face of change. When Caitlin Clark entered the WNBA, the expectation was simple. Be good. Adjust to the speed. Learn from the veterans. Take your lumps. Earn your place. But that script got torn up almost immediately. Instead of slowly blending in, she detonated onto the scene.
Logo 3.
No-look passes. Audacious confidence. Sold-out arenas in cities that hadn't seen crowds like this in years. Television ratings exploding. Jerseys flying off shelves. Media coverage crossing into mainstream sports conversations that had rarely centered women's basketball before. The impact was instant. And that's where things got uncomfortable. Because growth is exciting until it shifts the spotlight. Suddenly, private flights became part of the conversation. Suddenly, networks were bidding harder. Suddenly, ticket prices surged. Suddenly, opposing arenas filled not just to support the home team, but to see her. And when change happens that fast, it doesn't just create opportunity. It creates tension. Some saw evolution.
Others saw invasion.
That tension spilled onto the court. Hard fouls that felt personal. Extra contact that felt intentional. Smirks. Stares. Body language that told a story even when words weren't spoken.
It was competitive, yes, but it was also charged.
And that's when the legends started talking. Former players who rarely involved themselves in WNBA discourse suddenly had opinions. They weren't analyzing footwork. They weren't breaking down defensive schemes. They were reacting to what felt like targeted hostility. Because basketball has always had rivalries. It has always had physicality. But there's a difference between competition and something else, something sharper. And people noticed. They noticed that every minute Clark played felt like an event. They noticed that every game she entered carried a playoff-level intensity. They noticed that defenders weren't just guarding her. They were trying to send messages.
She is so good at extending and using that length to pressure.
And the conversation grew louder. Meanwhile, Clark kept shooting. She kept passing. She kept drawing double teams 30 feet from the rim. She kept absorbing contact and getting up.
No dramatic social media rants.
No explosive press conferences. Just that steady composure and the same calm confidence that defined her college run. That composure may have been the most disruptive thing of all. Because critics were waiting for arrogance. They were waiting for immaturity. They were waiting for her to crack. Instead, she kept delivering highlights. And with every highlight came more attention. And with more attention came more pressure, not just on her, but on the league itself. For years, conversations around women's basketball centered on respect and recognition, on fairness, on pay equity, on exposure. Now exposure had arrived in overwhelming fashion. But exposure changes dynamics. Veteran players who had built the league through years of grinding suddenly found themselves sharing headlines with a rookie whose popularity seemed to eclipse everything. That kind of shift doesn't happen quietly. It forces identity questions. It forces pride battles. It forces comparisons. And comparisons are dangerous. Because Caitlin Clark wasn't just playing well, she was becoming symbolic. Symbolic of a new era. Symbolic of mass appeal. Symbolic of crossover superstardom. And symbolism amplifies everything. Every foul became a debate. Every omission became a controversy. Every comment became fuel. When discussions emerged about Olympic selections and roster decisions, the tension reached a new level. Fans questioned how the most talked-about player in women's basketball could be left off certain lists. Analysts debated merit versus marketing. Social media erupted. It stopped being just about performance. It became about politics, about optics, about what message was being sent. And in the middle of it all, Clark kept showing up. Game after game. Arena after arena. Walking into hostile environments where boos were louder than cheers. But here's what made it extraordinary. The boos didn't shrink her. They amplified her. Because sports history tells us something important. When the crowd reacts that loudly, you're no longer just a player. You're a phenomenon. And that phenomenon began attracting unlikely defenders. Former skeptics who once questioned whether her style would translate started admitting the obvious. The range wasn't reckless, it was strategic. The audacity wasn't arrogance, it was vision. The hype wasn't artificial, it was measurable. Numbers don't lie. Ratings don't lie. Attendance doesn't lie. Economic ripple effects don't lie. The arenas were fuller. The cameras were more present. The discussions were broader. And the ripple extended beyond the WNBA. Casual NBA fans were tuning in. Sports debate shows were dedicating segments. Podcasts that rarely mentioned women's basketball were suddenly breaking down Clark's performances. That kind of cultural crossover is rare. And rare things unsettle established systems. Then came one of the most fascinating moments in the entire saga, when powerful voices entered spaces that felt politically charged. When major basketball figures spoke positively about Clark in environments where criticism had been dominant, it wasn't accidental. It was bold. It signaled something deeper, that the narrative was no longer one-sided. Even those who initially doubted her began reframing their stance. Some admitted they underestimated her. Others acknowledged that regardless of personal feelings, the impact was undeniable. That shift was significant. Because once acknowledgement becomes widespread, resistance weakens. But here's the twist. The controversy may have strengthened her more than universal praise ever could. Adversity sharpens focus.
4-second inbound play. Gray looking for an opening. Lofts it.
Doubt builds edge. And Clark plays with edge. You can see it when she pulls from distances that defy coaching logic. You can see it when she threads impossible passes between collapsing defenders. You can see it when she absorbs contact, hits the floor, and pops back up without theatrics. She plays like someone who knows the noise exists and uses it. This entire situation has exposed something raw about professional sports. It has revealed how fragile acceptance can be, how quickly admiration can turn into scrutiny, how growth can create friction instead of unity. But it has also revealed something powerful. It has shown that one player, if skilled enough, confident enough, resilient enough, can shift economic patterns, can shift cultural conversations, can shift generational interest. Clark represents a bridge between old fans and new fans, between traditionalists and modernists, between highlight culture and fundamental basketball IQ. She shoots like a street ball legend. She passes like a seasoned point guard. She markets like a global brand. And she competes like someone with something to prove. That combination is rare. And rarity attracts both devotion and hostility. The deeper truth is this. Leagues don't change gradually when a transcendent figure appears. They change abruptly. Think about what happens historically when a singular talent enters any sport. The ecosystem rearranges itself. Sponsorships realign. Media narratives evolve. Rivalries intensify. Standards elevate. We are in that moment now. The reason legends are speaking isn't random. It's recognition. Recognition that they are witnessing an inflection point. A rookie who isn't waiting her turn. A player who commands double teams before earning seniority. A competitor whose presence alone transforms road games into national events. That kind of gravitational pull is rare. And with rarity comes resistance. But here's what resistance often fails to understand. Attention is oxygen for growth. Even criticism keeps the spotlight on her. Even controversy sustains ratings. Even rivalry fuels interest. And interest drives everything. So while debates rage about treatment, about respect, about fairness, one undeniable fact remains. The game is being watched more closely than it has in years. And at the center of that spotlight stands Caitlin Clark. Not perfect, not untouchable, not invincible, but undeniably influential. The biggest names in basketball aren't speaking because they were asked to promote her. They're speaking because they recognize what's happening. They've seen it before in different forms, the arrival of someone who shifts the business and the balance at the same time. And when that happens, lines get drawn. Some align with tradition. Some align with transformation. Some try to stay neutral. But neutrality fades when the numbers become overwhelming. Clark's story isn't finished. In many ways, it's just beginning. She will have slumps. She will have playoff battles. She will face new challengers determined to test her. But the foundation has already been laid. She has proven that her presence changes economics. She has proven that her skill translates. She has proven that her composure withstands scrutiny. And most importantly, she has proven that she cannot be ignored. This isn't just a rookie season. It's a power shift unfolding in real time. It's a test of how institutions adapt to sudden stardom. It's a study in how personality, performance, and marketability intersect. And as the legends continue to watch, comment, and occasionally take sides, one truth becomes clearer with every deep three that splashes through the net. The game isn't the same anymore. Not because tradition disappeared, but because evolution arrived faster than anyone expected. And evolution doesn't ask permission. It just shows up from beyond the logo and changes everything.
Having herself a game. Knocks down.
He watched her pull up from distances that defied logic. From spots on the floor where defenders usually relax for half a second because nobody in their right mind would shoot from there. Except she would. And she did. Again.
And again.
And again. 10 times. 10 impossible shots. 10 moments where expectations said miss, and reality answered splash. That was the night everything shifted for Shaquille O'Neal. He didn't come in as a believer. In fact, he came in skeptical. He had seen hype before. He had seen college stars crumble under professional pressure. He had watched shooters with unlimited range get humbled by elite defenders closing out faster than they ever imagined. So when he saw Caitlin Clark lining up from near the logo, he expected regression. He expected reality to step in. Instead, she kept bending reality. Shot after shot, the ball snapped through the net with the kind of precision that forces even the most stubborn critic to sit back in silence. There's a difference between being impressed and being convinced. That night, Shaq crossed over from impressed to convinced. And then he said it. In Shaq's world, praise is not handed out lightly. Respect is earned the hard way. He has shared locker rooms with giants, battled legends, dominated an era. When he labels someone as truly elite, it's not a compliment, it's a declaration. And he gave that declaration to Caitlin Clark. Not in a comfortable setting, not in a friendly room full of supporters, but sitting directly across from Angel Reese, widely framed as Clark's rival, on a platform where he could have easily stayed neutral. He didn't. He leaned into the truth. Stop the nonsense. Recognize greatness when it stands in front of you. That moment wasn't just about Clark. It was about the league, about perspective, about history. Shaq understands something fundamental that sometimes gets lost in emotional debates. When a transcendent talent elevates a sport, you don't resist the momentum. You ride it. He lived it. When Magic Johnson and Larry Bird collided in the 1980s, they didn't tear the league apart. Their rivalry saved it. Television ratings soared. Arenas filled. The NBA transformed from struggling product to cultural powerhouse. When Michael Jordan dominated the 1990s, he didn't shrink opportunity. He expanded it. Teammates, opponents, shoe companies, broadcasters, everyone benefited from the global explosion of interest he generated. Shaq has always seen basketball through that macro lens. It's not just about pride.
It's not just about ego. It's about ecosystem.
And right now, that ecosystem is changing. Then came the Olympic roster announcement. When Summer Olympics selections were revealed and Caitlin Clark's name was missing, the reaction was immediate. Polarized. Emotional. Some argued experience. Veteran leadership.
Chemistry.
Others saw politics. A refusal to accelerate change. A committee clinging to hierarchy. On the surface, it looked like a public humbling. A reminder that popularity does not guarantee privilege. But then another former superstar stepped in with a different interpretation. Dwight Howard didn't see rejection. He saw timing. Clark had gone straight from an intense college season into the physical grind of the WNBA without pause. Media obligations. National scrutiny. Defensive schemes designed specifically to stop her. It was relentless. Fatigue had begun to show in flashes. Rushed decisions, shots falling just short. Moments where the weight looked heavy. Howard recognized what others ignored. The Olympic break wasn't punishment. It was recovery. And when Clark returned to the court after that window of rest, something subtle but undeniable had shifted. She was quicker, more decisive.
By Louisa Geisel-Suter. Final one.
More aggressive attacking space. The hesitation disappeared. The reads became sharper. The passes sliced through defensive gaps like she was operating half a second ahead of everyone else. And the shooting? It moved from spectacular to surgical. Long-range attempts that once felt daring began to feel inevitable. Defenders extended higher. Traps came earlier. Double teams formed before she crossed half court. It didn't matter. She adapted. The Indiana Fever, once drifting near the bottom of the standings, started stacking wins. Confidence rippled through the roster. Teammates ran harder in transition because they trusted the pass would arrive. Shooters spaced wider because they knew the defense would collapse on Clark. Momentum is contagious. And suddenly, what had been labeled a rebuilding year felt like a surge. Shaq's validation and the Olympic omission formed a perfect storm. One provided external affirmation, a legendary voice saying, "You belong." The other provided internal ignition, a quiet reminder that respect is never fully given. That combination is dangerous. It forges edge. Clark stopped looking like a talented rookie navigating turbulence and started looking like a franchise engine dictating tempo. This wasn't incremental growth. It was transformation. She wasn't just impacting games. She was reshaping perception. And that's when the older guard began weighing in. Isaiah Thomas approached the situation with calculated diplomacy. He praised Clark, praised the league, praised the marketing surge, praised the competition. But embedded in his commentary was an understanding only seasoned veterans truly grasp. Controversy drives commerce. Thomas has navigated basketball politics at every level: player, coach, executive. He understands how narratives are crafted, how tension fuels television segments, how debate sustains engagement. From his vantage point, the friction surrounding Clark wasn't accidental chaos. It was fuel. Conflict generates conversation. Conversation generates ratings. Ratings generate revenue. And revenue shapes decisions. He didn't accuse anyone directly. He didn't condemn the structure. But between his carefully chosen words was a subtle truth. The drama benefits the league far more than it harms it. Then came the generational lens of Reggie Miller. Miller grew up in an era where physicality was expected currency. Hard fouls were messages. Elbows were warnings. If you fell, you got up. If you complained, you were labeled soft. Watching Clark get bumped off her line, hip-checked in transition, knocked to the hardwood on contested threes. Miller's instinct was almost nostalgic. That's the league welcoming you. But what he underestimated wasn't the toughness. It was the undertone. There's a difference between testing a rookie and resisting a phenomenon. Miller came from a culture where great players understood that rivalry elevated everyone. When Magic and Bird battled, they understood the spotlight was shared. When Jordan rose, even those chasing him benefited from the global wave. The tension surrounding Clark carries a different texture. It isn't simply competitive. It's existential. Some veterans see a spotlight shifting faster than expected, a rookie commanding endorsements and headlines that once required years of grinding. That kind of acceleration unsettles tradition. Miller, brilliant as he is, filtered the moment through the prism of his own era and missed that this resistance isn't purely about physical initiation. It's about relevance. Then there was Magic. Magic Johnson sees long arcs. He remembers entering a struggling NBA in 1979. He remembers skepticism. He remembers doubters. He also remembers what happened when rivalry turned into renaissance. He looks at Clark, Reese, Cameron Brink, and sees possibility. He sees young stars injecting oxygen into a league hungry for expansion. But he also understands hierarchy. Popularity is platform. Performance is permanence. Magic's advice carried balance. Embrace the spotlight, but keep building. Let teammates protect and support. Understand that being the face doesn't automatically make you the best yet. His wisdom wasn't defensive. It was developmental.
They're still playing without Kelsey Mitchell. She's got the 5 fouls.
Together, Thomas, Miller, and Magic painted a layered picture. Political awareness, generational interpretation, historical perspective. And then came the most unfiltered voice of all, Charles Barkley. Barkley doesn't dance around discomfort. He doesn't calibrate phrasing to protect feelings. When he sees something he considers unfair, he says it. And watching Clark absorb what he believed crossed from competition into targeted hostility, he reached a breaking point. To Barkley, this wasn't about race, not about marketing, not about media narratives.
It was about logic.
If one player is bringing unprecedented eyeballs to your league, elevating charter flight conversations, expanding sponsorship attention, drawing sellout crowds, why treat her like an intruder? His criticism was blunt. Stop attacking the golden goose. Barkley's frustration reflected a broader realization. Professional sports are businesses wrapped in emotion. Pride matters. Legacy matters. But sustainability matters more. Clark's presence has shifted metrics in measurable ways. Attendance spikes when she visits. Merchandise surges. Broadcast numbers climb. That isn't speculation. That's data. And data reshapes strategy. What we're witnessing is not just the rise of a star. It's the collision between tradition and acceleration. Clark accelerated the timeline. The league planned gradual growth. She triggered immediate escalation. And institutions rarely adjust comfortably to sudden acceleration. But here's the most important layer of all. Through all of it, praise, skepticism, snubs, endorsements, criticism, Clark has remained centered. She answers questions without theatrics. She absorbs contact without prolonged outrage. She celebrates teammates. She studies film. She returns to the floor and shoots from places defenders still consider unreasonable. That steadiness is disarming. Because opponents can prepare for arrogance. They can prepare for volatility. It's harder to prepare for quiet inevitability. Every era-defining player carries that inevitability. The sense that resistance delays, but does not derail. The sense that numbers accumulate despite narrative turbulence. Clark is still at the beginning of that arc. She will have playoff disappointments. She will face defensive schemes built specifically to erase her strengths. She will encounter new challengers determined to prove the spotlight belongs elsewhere. But the foundation is already visible. External validation from legends who recognize greatness. Internal fuel born from exclusion and doubt. Team transformation. League-wide conversation. Economic ripple effects. This is not a fleeting storyline. It's structural change. And structural change always meets friction before acceptance. Shaq's praise provided armor. The Olympic omission provided edge. The critics provided fuel. The veterans provided commentary. The fans provided amplification. And Clark provided performance. That equation is powerful. Because when greatness intersects with resilience, it creates longevity. The story is far from over. Records will fall. Rivalries will intensify. Narratives will evolve. But one truth is already solidifying. Greatness recognizes greatness. And what we are witnessing isn't simply a talented rookie navigating controversy. It's the early chapter of a career that may redefine expectations, not just for scoring range, not just for rookie impact, but for how quickly one player can alter the trajectory of an entire league. This moment will be studied, debated, replayed, analyzed. But years from now, when the dust settles and the emotion cools, one thing will remain undeniable. The shift began when a young guard pulled up from beyond the logo and refused to miss.
Ball is tipped out to Cloud. Ionescu trying to finish the half,
And when Charles Barkley finally let it rip, you could feel the frustration through the screen. This wasn't playful debate. This wasn't hot take theater. This was disgust. Not competitive. Not protective.
Petty.
That was the word he chose. Petty cuts deep because it strips away excuses. It suggests insecurity instead of rivalry. And Barkley wasn't talking about hard defense or physical play. He was talking about attitude, about the energy surrounding Caitlin Clark and the way some within the ecosystem were responding to her rise. Barkley pointed out what millions of fans could already see. Clark isn't shrinking the league. She's expanding it. She's the reason television partners are renegotiating deals. She's the reason arenas that once struggled to fill lower bowls are now packed wall to wall. She's the reason charter flight conversations became real instead of symbolic. She's the reason casual sports fans, the kind who never watched a WNBA possession before, suddenly know game schedules. Every player benefits from that. More exposure means more leverage. More leverage means better contracts. Better contracts means sustainability. Yet instead of universal appreciation, Clark walked into resistance. Barkley didn't stop with players. He pivoted to the media, and that's where his critique became surgical. He argued that too many journalists were manufacturing hostility because controversy drives clicks. That personal dislike was creeping into coverage. That narratives were being shaped less by performance and more by emotion. You can't slander someone just because you don't like their personality. For Barkley, this wasn't about fandom. It was about fairness. He's been criticized his entire career. He knows what legitimate basketball critique sounds like. And he knows what jealousy sounds like. When Chuck calls something unjust, people listen. And then, the silence broke. For years, Michael Jordan mastered the art of strategic quiet. He doesn't speak casually. He doesn't involve himself in every debate. His post-retirement persona has been defined by precision, words chosen carefully, statements released rarely. So when Jordan weighed in, the temperature shifted. This wasn't chatter. This was an indictment. Jordan's message was clear. The league owes Caitlin Clark protection. Not favoritism, protection. Protection from inconsistent officiating. Protection from systemic bias. Protection from the kind of unchecked physical targeting that risks harming not just a player, but an entire movement. Jordan understands transcendent value. He understands what happens when a generational star emerges. He lived it. He built an empire around it. And he knows that if institutions fail to safeguard transformational talent, they damage their own future. His warning was subtle but unmistakable. Appreciate what you have or risk squandering it. Then came the most poetic endorsement of all. Because if there is one active player who understands what it means to bend geometry on a basketball court, it's Stephen Curry. The comparisons between Curry and Clark began years ago. Deep range, lightning release, fearless shot selection. But Steph didn't reduce his praise to surface-level similarities. He broke it down technically. Release time, balance mechanics, shot preparation, decision speed. He studied her game the way elite players study each other. And what he found wasn't imitation.
How many
It was
players can get
mastery.
into double digits for Seattle today? I think that'd be one of the questions because they are.
Curry noted that Clark's ability to relocate off the ball, to manipulate defenders with subtle hesitations, to turn a defensive lapse into an immediate scoring burst mirrors the evolution of modern perimeter offense. But he went further than mechanics. He recognized her vision, her ability to elevate teammates, her command of pace. He understands the cultural layer too. Curry didn't just change how people shoot. He changed what people believe is possible. Clark is triggering a similar recalibration in women's basketball. When Curry validates you publicly, you're not just being complimented. You're being welcomed into a fraternity of innovators. And together, Barkley's bluntness, Jordan's authority, Curry's technical validation, they form something powerful. A shield. A collective acknowledgement from 3 different eras of greatness that what we're seeing isn't hype. It's historic momentum. But not every legend approached it with defense in mind. Kevin Garnett brought something else. Perspective forged in fire. Garnett entered the NBA as a teenager. Hype surrounded him. Veterans tested him. Physical play wasn't optional, it was initiation. And KG didn't just survive it. He absorbed it, weaponized it, let it harden him into an MVP and champion. So when Garnett watches Clark get bumped, shoved, tested, his reaction isn't outrage. It's recognition. This is the crucible. This is where mentality forms. To Garnett, the extra attention isn't disrespect, it's acknowledgement of threat. Defenders don't body-check irrelevance. They don't scheme obsessively for mediocrity. They escalate when they're worried. KG's advice isn't gentle. Embrace it. Use it. Answer contact with dominance. He believes the best don't retreat from resistance. They amplify their response. That perspective doesn't cancel Barkley's frustration or Jordan's warning. It complements them. It suggests that while the league must evolve, the player must harden too. And Clark appears to be doing exactly that. What's unfolding beneath the noise is bigger than individual games. For decades, the WNBA operated in underdog mode. Loyal fan base, deep respect from purists, limited mainstream spotlight. Players developed a siege mentality, constantly defending legitimacy against dismissive critics. Then Clark arrived with something different. She didn't ask to be validated. She didn't beg for coverage. She generated it. Her presence attracted fans who never previously tuned in. She blurred the boundary between NBA-centric audiences and women's basketball loyalists. She created conversation in spaces that once ignored the league entirely. That kind of crossover is seismic. And seismic shifts create fault lines. Some veterans see opportunity. Others feel displacement. It's not about accuracy, it's about emotion. Because when a rookie commands headlines before paying traditional dues, it disrupts hierarchy. And hierarchy resists disruption. This is the paradox. The player driving growth faces the sharpest scrutiny. The athlete expanding revenue absorbs the heaviest contact. The star increasing leverage for future contracts becomes the lightning rod for resentment. But history is instructive here. When transformative players emerge, institutions face a choice.
So she's reading the second defender. In this
Adapt
case, it's
or
Boston.
resist. Magic and Bird transformed the NBA because the league embraced the rivalry. Jordan globalized basketball because the NBA amplified his dominance. Curry redefined spacing because coaches evolved around him. The WNBA now stands at a similar crossroads. Clark is not diminishing the sport's identity. She's accelerating its reach. She's proving that women's basketball can command attention not as a counterpart, but as a standalone spectacle. The shots from 30 feet aren't gimmicks. They're invitations. Invitations for new fans. Invitations for media expansion. Invitations for commercial investment. The question isn't whether Clark can sustain excellence. She's already adjusting, already refining, already responding to traps and blitzes with counters. The deeper question is whether the ecosystem will synchronize with her momentum. Will officiating adapt to ensure fairness without favoritism? Will media narratives mature beyond personality-driven controversy? Will veteran leadership convert tension into collective elevation? Because, make no mistake, the spotlight is permanent now. Clark isn't a phase. She's a pivot point, and pivot points redefine trajectories. The next chapter isn't just about stat lines. It's about structure. It's about whether the league capitalizes on unprecedented engagement. It's about whether resistance evolves into rivalry, the healthy kind that fuels ratings without undermining respect. It's about whether history will remember this era as the moment the WNBA unified around acceleration, or hesitated. One thing is beyond debate. Caitlin Clark is not retreating. She's not shrinking her range. She's not softening her confidence. She's not dimming her presence to ease discomfort. She's playing, competing, learning, escalating. The legends have spoken. Barkley called out jealousy. Jordan demanded accountability. Curry validated innovation. Garnett endorsed resilience. Different tones. Same conclusion. Greatness is here. And greatness forces decisions. Years from now, analysts will look back at this stretch not as drama, but as inflection. The moment when a rookie's deep threes signaled something deeper. A recalibration of power. A renegotiation of visibility. A redefinition of what women's professional basketball could command on its own. The real story isn't controversy. It's transformation. And transformation rarely feels comfortable while it's happening. So the final question isn't about Clark's ability. It's about readiness. Is the league ready to align with the momentum she's generating? Is it ready to embrace expansion without defensiveness? Is it ready to protect, promote, and partner with a generational catalyst? Because history doesn't wait. It records. And what's being written right now will echo long after the final buzzer of this season. Caitlin Clark isn't going anywhere. The spotlight isn't dimming. The conversation isn't shrinking. This is only the beginning. And the next chapter? It's already unfolding. Are you ready to watch it happen?